is Tinus Kruger.
Thank you so much, Manjari. People are getting tired of my voice. So. Okay. Right, let's see if my presentation, oh my goodness, that doesn't look like me at all. Right, good morning still, I think, everyone again. My talk, I hope that it fits in with the 15 minutes because I didn't really have time to rehearse or to just check. So please stop me, Matea, when it's time. I also used this presentation some time ago for a webinar. So if you attended that webinar, you're more than welcome to take a little nap. It's more or less going to be the same. And, and if you took a nap during the webinar, there's a chance for you to see it now. It was at the time focused on septet and architecture, but I think for us here, it will show you also what can be done in the types of communities that you also referred to. And I'm going to use some examples from South Africa. So yes, I'm going to use some examples from South Africa, but I think that would also resonate with people in Brazil specifically and other developing countries. And I hope that it gives you some ideas of what can be done really from a design perspective in addition to all the others. And I'm going to start by saying that we all know, and we've seen that now this morning, septet is more than environmental design. We see these examples of design, and design can go wrong in anything. Designers make mistakes. But what I want to say, yes, it's more than design, but it also involves design. And I think we as people that design the physical environment need to be aware that we can play a specific role. We're not always the people that know how to deal with the social issues. We don't always know how to deal with some of the other softer issues, if you want to call it that. But we do have a role as designers. So what I would like to talk about very briefly, the two extremes. So in our case, the two extremes, you'll see just now what it means, but the two extremes provide opportunities as well as in addition to the challenges that we face. And the challenges that we face in South Africa, inequality, I think you see the same here, but I can tell you that it is so visible in our country, and I think I've seen it here as well. You would have a very, very nice new building, and just around the corner, people will sleep on the street. And I think we all know what that means. We also have extreme levels of poverty, and unfortunately, we have to acknowledge that poverty and unemployment actually increased since 1994 when we got our new dispensation under Nelson Mandela at the time. And that is one of the challenges that we're facing, that it's not getting better, it's getting worse. We know the living conditions. We know that people live in extreme luxury, no problem with that, but the other aspect is that we also have the extreme levels of poverty. And you mentioned earlier on, Alain, that we talk about infrastructure. And in our case, it's exactly that the government who's responsible for providing that infrastructure is not doing that anymore. And that's why our informal settlements are really so, it is death, they're death traps, because the infrastructure does not keep up, or they're not there, it's not there. And if it is there, it's not being maintained. And this is what we can see here. We've got lovely parks like you do have here, and then just around the corner, you have nothing. That on that side is supposed to be a road, but it's basically just a stormwater drainage system that was not designed. We also have then the spilling over into the safety security aspect of our lives, whereas the people with the funding, because our police service is not keeping up with the needs in South Africa, most certainly, they have to take matters in their hands, and they have to spend their own money. So we see this very often where people close off their own neighborhoods. They use private security. something like CCTV cameras, high walls, electric fences, everything is commonplace in the more affluent communities. But the problem that we face is the majority of the people can't afford that. So what do? This is it. They have nothing. So if the police do not protect them, they have to protect themselves, and because they don't have the funding, the protection means something else to them. It means vigilantes. So what do? We want to improve the living conditions and enhance the livability and the quality of life. And that in itself brings with it the reduction in crime, and absolutely we can't prevent crime. We can hopefully reduce it a bit, but that's as much as we can do. So some of the easier examples where it comes to purely the physical environment, not discarding all the other aspects that have to go with that is whether you call it second or third generation, but from a physical design perspective, just improving the living conditions already makes a huge difference. This, on the left-hand side, would be an informal settlement. So we've got programs to upgrade informal settlements, and what you see on the right-hand side, you can even see it here. There's some informal settlements, and they are then transforming that into slightly more organized housing. But I must be quick to also then just acknowledge that it's not necessarily always the answer. Many of the people in South Africa will say that informal settlements, they are actually part of the solution, because without that, these people would literally be on the street. So these are some of the streets that we see in those areas that I've just shown you. Maybe by mistake or by accident, or there's some principles of SEPTED involved in that, even though the designers may not be aware of it. These squares that they've created provide the opportunity for people to interact, to socialize, and also to make use of it. Now, this is an accident that happened. I think people were not provided with clothing lines at their houses, so the squares became the areas where they would dry their clothes, and that brought with it surveillance and interaction and community participation by accident. I'm just going to use an examples of an organization that works in the Cape Town area, Violence Prevention Through Urban Upgrading, and I acknowledge them. They know I do, because us as the organization that I work for, just as an aside, it's a Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. We're a research organization. I'm a research architect, so we don't necessarily implement. So I'm always glad to see that there's some NGOs and other companies with donor funding that implement, because I can then at least show people the principles that we are promoting, what it looks like in practice. So this would be an area before, where we can see that there's no infrastructure, and then on the right-hand side, exactly the same area where they've tried to upgrade, at least make it more livable, and provide some infrastructure that people can use. The same here. This, let me just check, time's still fine? Okay. So this is a area where people can go and pick up water. They also use that informally for children to get together and learn from some of the people. So they use that as an informal learning environment. Then there's some factors that we need to consider, and a key here, like we've heard with all of it, is human behavior, because this is what we see along a river in informal settlements, that obviously it's dangerous. The houses will most certainly be swept away once or twice a year. So there was a huge program to try and prevent that. So they cleaned up the river. Now, human behavior meant that this photograph that was taken here, a month later, there was no opportunity to go and take another photograph like that, because it looked, again, like this. despite the fact that people know that their house will be swept away. There's no other space. They build there. So human behavior sometimes, with the best intentions in the world, does not make sense to some people when they really don't have a place to stay. So the biggest concern, by far the biggest concern, whether it's in the most affluent areas or in the poorest areas, the moment in our country is the lack of maintenance. And we know that septet, when it comes to especially the first generation type of septet interventions, if you don't maintain, you've wasted your money. And this is what we see quite often. Vandalism, these buildings in the city has been taken over by land drug lords, basically, who and nothing else, no one can get rid of these drug lords as well as the people living in these buildings. And something as simple as that, I previously used this park as an example of how to do it. Again, a few months later, everything was stolen or broken. So yeah, now I use it in what not to do. All right, some of the challenges and frustrations. In our case, when it comes to septet, we've been working in this field for 25 years, written some guidelines and all of that and spoken and taught local people at municipal level. But the lack of implementation means that no matter what you do, if people don't implement, and of course, I can't implement, okay. Then, yeah, the potential clients. One would say, often say in South Africa, even though we have a massive crime problem, and specifically violent crime, people, you wouldn't say that when it comes to trying to get money for research into this field. Want to buy a CCTV camera, you'll get sponsors, but don't try and do research to prevent crime or to reduce crime in the longer term. And I see some smiles, I know that happens everywhere. Then there's the perception that it will have huge financial implications. And sometimes just doing what you're supposed to do as a planner, an urban designer, an architect, doing it right from the start will mean that you will contribute to crime prevention initiatives. But obviously people always think that it's going to cost extra, and it doesn't always. And then, of course, architects and urban designers, planners, landscape architects are not necessarily equipped to do that. Even though they think they know how to do it, they may not necessarily know how to do it. They know what to do, but they don't know how to do it. And clients are most certainly, in most cases, not interested in paying a little bit extra to get someone with a speciality in that field. You know, trying to promote myself here, no funding. All right, that's it. I think that